I have new reporting from what happened behind closed doors with President Trump and President Zelensky during their hours-long meeting today that ended with the president calling for a ceasefire again and providing no new weapons that Ukraine was seeking. Sources described today's White House meeting as tense, frank, and at times uncomfortable, according to the reporting from me and my colleague Kristen Holmes. After that meeting ended, we saw the president come out and call on Russia and Ukraine to stop the war at its current battle lines.
They should stop the war immediately. You go by the battle line wherever it is, otherwise it's too complicated. You'll never be able to figure it out. You stop at the battle line, and both sides should go home, go to their families, stop the killing, and that should be it. Stop right now at the battle line. I told that to President Zelensky. I told it to President Putin.
Zelensky tonight said that he agrees when it comes to a ceasefire, as he made clear that Ukraine still wants these long-range missiles that can reach deep into Russia.
I think we have to stop where we are, and he is right. President is right that we have to stop where we are. This is important, to stop where we are and then to speak.
One person who described the president's thinking on that meeting said that both sides need to make a deal and argued the conditions are only going to get worse as winter approaches, and basically said the president's belief here is that Ukraine wants to prolong this war. That is the president's thinking, and if this feels like a big turn from where Trump was, it is, because he's now calling for the battle lines to stay exactly where they are now, after 3 weeks ago declaring that he thought Ukraine could fight and win back all of its territory in its original form with the help of Europe and NATO. This change of heart is after Trump's 8th phone call in 8 months that he's had with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. And you can't forget, of course, that meeting they had in Alaska that failed to bring the two sides closer to any kind of ceasefire or end of this war. And the reality of the president's new proposal to stop this war is significant. The difference between where these battle lines are now and each country's original borders, about the size of Pennsylvania. More than 3 million people would go from being citizens of Ukraine to Russia. President Trump's new position that both countries should stop where they are marks only the latest in his ever-shifting positions on this war. It's a shift you can track from earlier this afternoon, late this summer, and when he returned to the White House.
A few weeks ago in New York, when you two met, you said that you think Ukraine could ultimately take back all the territory that it's lost so far. Do you still think that's the case, or do you think there'll have to be some sort of
You
swap
never
of
know.
territories?
Look, war is very interesting. You never know, do you? You just never know. With war and peace, but you never know. We're going to change the lines, the battle lines. Russia's occupied a big portion of Ukraine. They've occupied some very prime territory. We're going to try and get some of that territory back for Ukraine.
You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Joining me tonight is David Remnick, the longtime editor of The New Yorker and host of The New Yorker Radio Hour. And it's so great to have you here, because I just wonder, when you look at what you heard from the president today, compared to what he said 3 weeks ago, what you think has changed the president's mind now?
Well, with this president, so much is personal, so much is improvised that it's very hard to say. I mean, we want to put our very logical lenses on these things and analyze them very seriously, but I think that's kind of impossible. Look at what happened with the Middle East. In February, last February, President Trump was saying that Gaza should maybe become depopulate itself of Palestinians and become a kind of Riviera of the Middle East. And this inflamed the annexationist impulses of the far right. It did a lot of damage. And then we've come to this point where we are now, and we've just kind of declared peace. And, we have a ceasefire, and thank God for that. And it's great that it's wonderful that the hostages have been released and the fire bombardment has stopped. But peace has not in our time come quite yet. And when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, we have even less leverage. And we have to look at the terrible damage that's going on there. Hundreds of thousands of people on both sides have died. And President Putin shows no sign of relenting in any which way. And meanwhile, the president of the United States behaves in this kind of rhetorically erratic way and very often humiliates the one hero in the picture, who is the president of Ukraine. It's very, very hard to read. And to think we can with any exactitude, I think is an illusion.
Yeah, I mean, he said that 3 weeks ago. Then he sounded open to giving them these Tomahawk missiles that Ukraine very much wants. They're made by Raytheon. They were meeting with Raytheon executives in Washington while the president was there. And then he goes into this meeting so clearly wanting that. But it was clear after Trump's phone call with Putin yesterday that this was not likely going to happen. I want you to hear what Zelensky said today about these missiles that he's asking for.
Are you more or less optimistic that you are going to get those Tomahawks?
I'm realistic.
I mean, he's laughing there. I wonder what you made of that.
He knows he's not getting them. He knows he's not getting them. It's the one difference between this meeting and the dramatic meeting in February is there was no public humiliation. That was one of the most, cringe-making, horrific diplomatic events in the recent history of the United States. It was just terrible to see the humiliation of a heroic figure, a figure that's fighting for the freedom and independence of his own people, and for Europe as well, to be humiliated by the president of the United States. Today, this took place in private. I mean, I am glad the administration is engaged in both this issue and in the Middle East, but the nature of the engagement is so erratic and so personally tinged, and so it's filled with the language of salesmanship and personal relationships. And if you declare peace, you have peace. That's an illusion. These settlements come hard traditionally, and just because Donald Trump thinks he is gifted with magic, he has discovered that he not only can't solve this in one day. It's now 8 months, and thousands of people are dying every week. So it's an extremely difficult spectacle to witness.
Well, I think the part of his statement that stood out the most to me was he said, let both sides declare victory and let history be the decider here. I mean, saying that ahead of a potential meeting with Putin is something.
I just don't know what that means. It might not mean anything to President Trump in terms of territory and the many thousands of people who would be on one side of the border or another and whose fates would be decided. But it certainly means a lot to the Ukrainians. The terrible tragedy here is this has gone on for so long that we must remember that it's a miracle that Ukraine is even in this fight at all. They have lost so many young men. They've lost so much infrastructure. So many villages and cities have been either razed. We look at Gaza and we see in a very compact area just an absolute devastation, but spread out over a much bigger landscape in Ukraine, there's horrific damage, both in human terms and in terms of the infrastructure of Ukraine. It's going to take a very long time and a great deal of support for that country to make its way back. And yet they have fought so heroically, and that can't be underestimated. And not only for themselves, but on behalf of the free world. And it's an astonishing thing. And I just wish our president's rhetoric and his engagement with Ukraine was more serious and more sympathetic.
David Remnick, it's always great to have you. I know the New Yorker Festival is coming up. I can't wait for that. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks so much, Ken. It's good to see you.